Great. Well, let's go ahead and get started. And as people come in, I'm going to start with the minutes approval. Did everyone get the minutes from the last meeting? Can someone make a motion to approve?
Is this the one that Joni did? Because
Yes.
she forgot to mention that I was there, but she mentioned in the news. And also it was Kim Knox who made the motion.
She didn't include Kim either.
Well, she put, I'm not sure who made the motion. And then she quotes me, but I'm not listed in the
attendees. Okay. So can we approve the minutes as amended by the add Margie Larson to the attendees?
I move that we approve the minutes to be approved with the addition of Margie Larson in attendance.
Okay.
Kim Knox.
Second. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. And then I'll read the goals of the committee to gain a better understanding of the strengths and weaknesses of the criminal justice system of San Diego County and advocate for best practices. And so today we have Paul Parker from CLERB to actually help us with reaching one of our goals. I'd like to give a brief introduction to Paul. So he returned as executive officer of San Diego CLERB in November of 2020, having previously served in that role for over a year in 2017 and 18. Paul is the former Chief Deputy Director at the LA County Department of Medical Examiner Coroner. He was Assistant Coroner at the Clark County Office of the Coroner and Medical Examiner. He was Director of the Pinal County in Arizona Medical Examiner's Office and previously held Chief Investigator roles at the San Diego County Medical Examiner Office and the Maricopa County Medical Examiner's Office. That's in Phoenix. In addition to this is what I think I knew some of that, Paul, but I didn't know all of this, that in addition to his medical legal death investigation experience, he had a successful 10-year law enforcement career at a suburban Phoenix Police Department, holding progressive ranks from police aide to sworn officer to detective to sergeant to lieutenant and to acting police chief. And despite being the town council's first choice for police chief, he turned it down to pursue his passion for death investigations. And I'm so glad that someone has a passion for death investigations. We certainly need you, and it's probably not something that a lot of people would, especially with this expertise. So Paul, I'd like to hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And thank you all for having me. Thank you for the invite. Yeah, as far as death investigation goes, I can tell you that that is my passion. When I was a police officer, I was involved in a shooting where I thought I was going to die. And so then I got into death investigation. And ultimately, I always believed that we were the voice of those who were left behind and do the notification of those people to the family members. So coming to CLERB, you might ask, well, why are you at CLERB then? Well, the reason I came to CLERB is to look at death from a different perspective, right? With the changes that have happened at the county board of supervisors and with our CLERB board, I figured that this was the best time and with the obvious issues and concerns with the number of deaths that are occurring in San Diego County jails right now, this is a time for me to come back and really put the focus on how do we prevent these deaths? What's going on? Is there a way that we can help at least save a life somehow, some way, right? So that's why I'm here. So briefly, just an overview of CLERB, okay? So the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board was voted in by the voters in 1991. So we've been around for that long, right? 31, 32 years. Our main task at the time we were voted in was to investigate complaints of misconduct with a signed complaint from anyone. So any kind of signed complaint alleging excessive force, illegal search and seizure, false arrest, false reporting, any kind of procedural misconduct, any violation of state laws. And we have the jurisdiction to do so over only the sworn members of the sheriff's department, so the deputies, and the sworn members of the probation department, so the probation officers. In addition to being able to investigate those allegations with a signed complaint. Up until last year, we had the jurisdiction solely to investigate deaths without a signed complaint. Deaths that occurred due to the actions of, or in connection with the actions of members, sworn members of the department. So any deputy involved shooting, any deputy that gets into a pursuit with someone and then that ends in a death. But we also look at it as any death that occurs in the custody of the detention facilities in San Diego County, to include the juvenile detention facilities run by the probation department. But over the last 10 years, there have been 2 deaths in those detention facilities. Both, one was a suicide, and one is still pending. We think it's an overdose, but we don't know yet. But otherwise, as you know, over the last 15 years, there's been an average of 1 death in the custody of the San Diego County Sheriff. The jails run by the Sheriff's Department. Since February 3rd, when Sheriff Gore left office, when he left office this year, there were no deaths in custody from January 1st to February 3rd. From February 10th, from February, about the 10th to now, there have been 9 deaths in custody. There have been 2 deputy involved shootings resulting in a fatality. So we have jurisdiction over those, and let me just talk about that a little bit more. We also have jurisdiction without a signed complaint for any uses of force resulting in great bodily injury, any discharge of firearm, or any use of force at a protest or First Amendment protected event. So those are the categories. That's what we have jurisdiction over. Now, the main topics that are facing the Sheriff's Department are the deaths in custody. I proposed, let me back up. CLERB is advisory only. We have no teeth whatsoever to impose discipline. We do our investigations. The staff does. We do investigations into these cases, the deaths or allegations of misconduct. We write a report. Because of the laws that exist over the last 15 years, everything we do as far as our investigations is confidential. We can't identify deputies in public. We can't talk about the cases in public. We can only issue highly redacted reports and versions of what we've come up with. It's crazy. So we've been pushing for transparency and civilian oversight. It used to be transparent. We used to be able to talk about these things in public. There was a major court case in 2006 that there's an assembly bill now to overturn. The Copley Press decision. If that gets overturned, we will be able to be more transparent. But right now, quite frankly, because of mismanagement of our office, much of the last 15 years, we've had to dismiss a bunch of cases because they've timed out. A couple of years ago, it's poorly managed. We're looked at, quite frankly, as a rubber stamp for the department. No teeth, no nothing, advisory only. I decided to come back and tackle this because I do believe that civilian oversight should play a very important role. We're independent. We're not an advocate for anyone. We're simply an advocate for wherever the investigation takes us. So that's what we do. But I do believe that now, especially in this era after George Floyd and many other, that's a flat out murder, and all the other concerns that have been raised between the law enforcement and community relationship, this is a time for the community to be more involved and listened to and looked at. Deputies and probation officers will tell you, we have no respect for a civilian organization looking at what we do because you've never walked in our shoes. And my response to that is, so you have absolutely no respect for the juries that sit every day and do the exact same thing in criminal trials and civil trials. They've never walked in those shoes, but yet they look at evidence, they look at policies, they look at laws, and they seem to come up with the right outcome way more often than not, one would think. So that's my response to them. We are in our advisory role. One of the things that we can do in public, And one of the things that the departments respond to us and we create the dialogue is to make policy recommendations. We have the jurisdiction to look at any policy that the department has, case specific or not. So I have made it my goal to review their policies and to be proactive. As you know, the state auditors, the California State Auditor Office of the State Auditor, has done a report. Obviously, major issues with the department. We commissioned our own report. Our own report indicates that San Diego County is the only statistically significant county out of the other 11 largest counties that has a high rate of overdose deaths in its jails. No other county has the rate that San Diego County has. Most of the counties have 4 times the expected number of suicide deaths than you would have in the general public. That's, I hate to say it, but being in custody there increases the risk of suicide. The department has reduced the number of suicides that have occurred in its custody. They have done that. They do need to increase the medical and mental health screening. They do need to increase the quality of their safety checks. We have dinged the department on regular occasions about the checks that their deputies do. They're not doing them the way they should be done. They're not finding people in time. They're not confirming that people are healthy and alive. So we have recommended, back to our policy recommendations, because we're advisory only, they don't have to listen to us. But I'm going to force a public dialogue. I'm going to force this dialogue by making these policy recommendations. So over the last couple of months, I recommended that they use technology to monitor the health and safety of their inmates. There are wristbands that exist. Yes, it's going to cost money, but there are bands that exist that you could put on your inmates to determine. I mean, your Fitbit does it all day, every day. Tells you what your pulse is, tells you what your respiratory. I mean, come on, why can we not do that in the jails? Why can we not? And they're going to say it's a cost issue, and I understand that. But what's the cost of one person's life, right? So I'm recommending that they do that. We recommended it at a meeting I recommended last night that they provide naloxone or Narcan to the inmates themselves. Right now, the deputies have access to Narcan, which is great because the deputies are using it every time. No, that's wonderful. But we know with the jail politics with some of the inmates, sometimes people are found down, and if the shot caller in the jail doesn't allow for other inmates to call for help, could be problematic, right? I mean, so we're asking that they look at that as well. We have entered into an MOU with them in which they allow me to respond to these death scenes now. We're working on fine-tuning that. We're working on me getting better access closer to the body. I've seen thousands and thousands and thousands of bodies in my career. I know how to handle myself at a death scene. It's just a matter of trust right now. So we're working through that so that they know, so that the community can know that you have a community representative who is there, who's looking at and making sure things are being done in a professional manner, nothing's being covered up or whatever. So those are my focus. My focus is on increasing the communication. Right now, family members, they're not communicated with. They're initially told that the death has happened, but then for months and months at a time, they're not really provided any information, any follow-up, and they're certainly not met with after the end of the investigation to be told exactly what happened to their loved one. More often than not, family members have to sue to learn this information. We know that the county is going to circle the wagons and be very tight-lipped when it comes to any liability issues or concerns. We understand that, but I don't care. If it's your family, would not you want information? Wouldn't you want to be kept in the loop? Wouldn't you want to know exactly what happened? So I will continue to force that issue as well as far as communicating with families, communicating with the public. So those are things right now that are in the sheriff's court for them to respond to us. That's what I think our limited ability is, honestly. If we do an investigation, when we do an investigation, for example, we recommended last night that a deputy who failed to do a proper count, who failed to conduct the temperature check of an inmate, who ultimately was found dead in his cell, we recommended to that deputy that he did something wrong. So our board said, yes, he did something wrong. We sustained the finding. The department doesn't have to tell us what discipline, if any, they implement based on that. They don't have to do anything we ask. So we're toothless when it comes to that. The deputy can appeal that finding to the County Civil Service Commission because it is, quote, a punitive action, but we don't know exactly what happened at the department. We don't know what they've done. The policy recommendations are the only way we know what they've done because they will respond to us in writing. So could we be stronger? Could we be much stronger? Yes, of course we could. Right now, we're advisory only. Right now, you know, I kind of went back and forth with the department recently about the recent MOU that they signed with with San Diego Police Department and other agencies about shootings. Who's going to investigate a shooting? If the sheriff's department shoots and kills someone or shoots someone, the police department, San Diego Police Department, will be the lead investigative agency. The purpose for that was to increase public trust. Okay, I don't really know how much it increases public trust because it's law enforcement investigating law enforcement. I think really if you're going to increase public trust, from my background as a previous law enforcement officer, but also as a death investigator who's dealt with family members for years and years and years, is you get the community input. You talk to the community. You at least listen. Just go through the motions. Something that you at least got some input and you at least care about what the community that you are tasked to serve. We all know that the culture it's an us versus them culture. I'm not anti-law enforcement, please. I was a police officer for a long time. But right now, the community relations with the departments could be doing a better job, you know, because right now, who are the people that are getting listened to are very, very vocal activists in the community, and many of those folks are anti-law enforcement, right? But I think that if law enforcement could reach out and continue to do and meet with as many different community groups as possible and get that input, I think that would be beneficial. That's just my soapbox. As far as CLERB, I've told you basically what we do and what our limitations are. We cannot do anything about misconduct without a signed complaint. A lot of people don't want to make a signed complaint. They don't want to sign something under penalty of perjury because they don't want to be retaliated against. At least half of our complainants are in the jails themselves, so they don't want to put anything in writing about what they believe is going on or not going on. So we don't have the ability to take anonymous complaints or investigate anonymous complaints. The Peace Officer Bill of Rights and the laws that protect police officers California has some of the strictest in the country, which is why we cannot be transparent and talk about who we're investigating or what. You know, our investigative model is limited by that. You know, I think that CLERB, you know, if the community wants a civilian oversight entity to be able to really have true oversight, you would need a stronger model. Quite frankly, you would need something like maybe like Los Angeles has an Office of Inspector General that can look at pattern and practice investigating, conduct pattern and practice investigations, can look at things without a signed complaint, to really and have access to the internal documentation is really what's to be a civilian entity that looks over those things. And so that's kind of the limitations. And Andre St. Julian and her, the San Diegans for Justice, I know that she met with you folks last month. She has been a very, you know, her role with Measure B and the city's board. Her focus is on CLERB right now, and her analysis and investigation has definitely indicated that, you know, we haven't lived up to what we could be doing, but we certainly weren't funded appropriately or staffed appropriately, nor do we have the jurisdiction that we should have. One of the things I've been pushing for since I've been back, and I'll continue to push for, as I mentioned to you, we only have jurisdiction over the sworn members. Most of these deaths that are occurring in custody, so the ones that are occurring in custody, we can't look at the medical staff. We can't look at what they did or didn't do. We don't have the, we don't have the jurisdiction. I'd like us to have the jurisdiction over anybody who provides medical or mental health services, to include contract employees, to be able for us to get personnel specially trained personnel, very much like a medical board, who could opine during their investigation whether or not a standard of care, there was a deviation from a standard of care. That would tend to paint the full picture, because right now we're only getting half the picture of those deaths that are occurring in the custody, in the jails. So that's what I'd like to see as well. I could go on, but I think that's my overview. I hope that's somewhat insightful. I can answer any questions or clarify anything that I was unclear.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, I'm sure we have questions. I'm looking at Stephanie. Stephanie has a question.
I do, and I hope you can hear me. If I understood you correctly, you used to be able to publicly discuss your findings and your investigations, and that changed sometime through the, well, and that's my question. How did it change, and what prevents you? Do you have a contract with anybody? Was there a limitation in the initiation of this board? And how can we change your jurisdiction as you describe it?
Right now, it was a court case from 2006 called Copley Press versus San Diego. Because of that case, everything was shut down. Our ability to conduct open meetings was shut down. Our ability to really be transparent was shut down. So right now there's an assembly bill, and I wish I knew it off the top. I think it's 2557. I think that's going through the assembly right now to completely overturn Copley. If it's successful, which is what needs to happen, it's that needs to be overturned. If it's overturned, we should be able to go back to public meetings to discuss and be transparent, because right now we're not. So when when the CLERB was created in the early 90s, everything was in the open. Everything. The case discussions were in the open. The only things that we could not say were things that we did obtain via confidential means, whatever that would be. And some of the statements that were provided were confidential. We couldn't talk about that, but we could identify the deputies. We could say exactly what our investigation did or did not uncover, what we did and did not do. So it's Copley that needs to be overturned, and there's a push for that right now. And that would not just impact us. I mean, that would impact every civilian oversight entity in the state. We're all hamstrung.
Wow. That'd be great. I'll have to look to see if the league is supporting that. I know I have a question. So you were talking about the police officers' Bill of Rights, that it's in, or how strong it is in California.
Yeah.
But there are still some counties that do a better job than San Diego County, right? So what are those kind of changes that could be made and still fit in with the Bill of Rights?
Well, some of the counties, as far as that they do better, I know that some counties somehow, and I don't want to jeopardize those counties, somehow they have access to internal affairs records. The law clearly says we do not. San Diego City itself, the San Diego City Board, has access to the internal affairs records. We don't. I'm working with outside counsel. We have new outside counsel who's the same counsel that now the San Diego City Board has. We just brought him on. Dwayne Bennett is his name. I'll be meeting with him to discuss these very issues. Like, how do other entities have access to the internal affairs? I just had a conversation with the Sheriff's Department this morning. We don't have access to their internal affairs records. And my understanding is it's a law thing. So I don't want to jeopardize other entities and make a big deal of it, because I don't want to take it away from them. If they have it, then more power to them. But right now we don't. We're not privy to that. So I don't know if that answers the question. I just don't know why some have it and some don't. But as far as some others, civilian oversight entities have power to hire and fire. Like Oakland's board is very strong. And I believe that it has the power to hire and fire the police chief. It's, but I want to make it very clear. A sheriff, here's the thing, a sheriff is a constitutional position who's elected. So interestingly enough, when Sheriff Gore was a sheriff and now Sheriff Ray, if somebody were to make an allegation against the sheriff himself or herself, when it was Kelly Martinez, we have no jurisdiction. We have no jurisdiction over the sheriff, him or herself, because of the constitutionally designated position. It's not like a police chief. So the sheriff is a whole different entity, and so there are some restrictions on that as well, if that answers some of the questions. And it is Assembly Bill 2557 that I was talking about, that's talking about getting rid of the conflict decision.
Okay. Anyone else? Because I have some more questions, but I don't want to dominate. Eileen,
You mute.
you're muted. Eileen, you're muted.
There you go. Okay, in the police study that we just completed, I did some research on the RIPA board that was established by the legislature and the sub division that called POST, Police Officer Standards and Training, that
Right.
they've been working on. And I wondered a couple of things. First of all, in talking about the Assembly Bill 2557, and also the fact that this RIPA board was a legislative act, do you feel that the legislature is sympathetic toward greater openness and greater enforcement of breaches of appropriate standards by police? That's my first part of it. And the second part of it is one of our members happened to forward just last night the auditor's report. And when I was looking at it, I was surprised that some of the information that they are looking at and concerned about was were postings by police officers on social media. And I know there had been a concern by the board itself about whether that information coming from those sources was a violation of people's privacy rights. And I wondered if you knew anything about that and whether that statement by the auditor is in itself an indication of something that could lead to greater transparency.
So a couple things. So in reference to whether the state, the legislators are sympathetic, we're going to find out. I do know that there have been some changes, some positive changes. SB 1421 passed a little while back, providing some more transparency about certain types of cases and to identify peace officers. That's number one. I know that there are additional laws that were recently passed that changed the standard for when someone can use deadly force. So it seems like, yes, it seems like there's a sympathy, you know, there's the desire to do things better, to hold accountable more and to be more transparent. But we'll find out. We'll see how this goes, because there's another one based on the state audit. It's Assembly Bill, I think 2343, which is called the Saving Lives in Custody Act, which is basically everything that the state auditor said about the sheriff's department. Dr. Weber, Keila Weber, has put forward this bill along with some other folks to basically take all that and mandate that these checks and the training and the mental health screening happens at a statewide level. So that's also going through the process. I would imagine that would pass as well. So I think there is going to be positive. There are going to be positive changes. That's number one. Number two, in reference to RIPA, interestingly enough, that is data, the Racial Identity and Profiling Act data that the department is mandated to report. The Sheriff's Department is mandated to report every year. They are supposed to be putting it on their website. The most recent information they have on their website as of last week was from 2019. So they don't have the 2020 information. They don't have the 2021 information on their website, but what they've said that they've done, because I've asked them, they said that they have, it's not on their website, but it is on file at the state where it should be, and you can search it that way. So when I met with the sheriff, I was like, well, Sheriff, you need to update your website. I mean, you know, it needs to be there. That information is very highly codified. It's anonymized. Like, you can't search it by deputy, but there is a way, and because one of the things that we've looked at is how do we investigate allegations of racial discrimination? Usually, unless there's some kind of egregious statement or gesture something just totally obvious. This state, I think there were 3,500 allegations of racial discrimination over a couple year period, and only 2% were sustained because it's he said, she said. You have no proof, right? So we were going to look at getting the RIPA data to compare the practice of someone to someone patrolling in the same area. That's going to be a fight when we ever try to do that. So I'm kind of going off, but I'm aware of the data. I know it's out there. The Sheriff's Department hasn't put it back up on their website for the last 2 years. That's that. In reference to the audit you're talking about, I think you may be talking about, if I'm correct, the social media thing. That was a recent audit from like last week. The Sheriff's Department was not involved in that audit, but if it's the same audit, I researched it. There are 5 large agencies in the state that the auditors went in and looked at the social media usage of officers and deputies, and there were things on there that could be racist or uses of force or violations of privacy. Next month, the Sheriff's Department doesn't know this yet. Since they weren't included in that audit, next month I'm making a policy recommendation to be very similar to what that, for them to do some kind of internal analysis of social media usage by their personnel to determine, to see if they can come up with are there postings or far, alignment with anti whatever, right? So that I think is what the one you're talking about. So there will be a policy recommendation on our agenda for next month for the department to do its own analysis and to look at its policies pertaining to social media usage for that very reason. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie, do you have another question, or is your hand still up?
No, I have tons like Eugene, and I'm trying not to, to do anything. The Sheriff's Policy and Procedure Manual, except in cases of excessive force, injury, that kind of thing, discourages almost, it doesn't say it quite in these words, but discourages the taking of a written complaint from someone. And I think that was confirmed with the forum we had for the sheriff candidates, that they say they like to resolve things at the lowest level possible. And the manual actually says that in specific instances of, they can just verbally counsel somebody, say there's nothing that they can do about it. This would never get you. So when you're trying to see whether, with all the other problems you have, trying to see whether there's a deputy who's biased, if you're not getting any written complaint because the deputies themselves are discouraging it, do you have any recommendations of how we can change things so those we can have actual records of misconduct on the part of the deputies that come to you?
And again, they're going to say, because our rules and regulations allow for us to, when the rules were written, allowed for us to receive, but to hold confidential a deputy's discipline history. That's what it says. But over the years, the department has said, ain't happening. It's not happening. We're not giving you this information. You're not going to know about it, because we're supposed to be given that information so that we can recommend what we believe is the appropriate discipline. But that's what I need to work with our new counsel on, as to why that's not happening. And if there's a way, because we're being told from the department, the personnel record, no personnel record we will release to you, 0. So that's, but again, other entities know it and we don't. So that's the only way, I'm going to have to work with our new counsel to figure out a way to do that, because we should know that. We should know exactly, what is going on with the deputy. So the only thing I'm left with is what is in our internal database? What have we said about that deputy over the years? And that's the only thing we have, but, so it's frustrating. It's frustrating. But one of the things too, so just so you know, as I said, we have that ability to look at policy and procedures, right? Any policies and procedures. So what I'm going to do is to begin looking at policies and procedures. Just go in and start looking at them. And and making change, making recommended changes, just as many as possible that if our CLERB board agrees, then forward to the department to have them do that and force the dialogue of change of why they're going to change it or not. That's my next big project.
All right. I'd like to throw in one or two of my questions. So sometimes well, let me go back to what you just said, that in the report that Andreas, St. Julian and San Diego for Justice, or they had a whole section on policies and procedures. Are those things that you agree with, that you think that they could be addressed? San
Diego Justice made it about 70. They identified it about 70 areas for potential improvement. Now, in those areas, there are some of those areas that the Board of Supervisors is going to have to take action, right? To strengthen us, to give us more jurisdiction, give us the jurisdiction over medical and mental health, to expand our jurisdiction in some way, shape, or form. There are recommendations that the CLERB board can implement, and there are recommendations that staff that we can do. I will tell you, out of the 70, and again, I haven't looked at all, like I didn't dive into all 70, and I don't have a plan of action yet, but I can tell you that most of what I'm seeing here should be done. It's on point. This report, I will tell you, the person that did this report from the University of Chicago, from back in Illinois, she is a nationally known expert. This is one of the best things I've ever seen written about us, as far as our history, as far as our areas for potential improvement. And if I had anything to say about it, which I will continue to do my best to do, these changes should be, many of these, not all, many of these changes should be implemented without a doubt. And at every one of our meetings from this point forward, so at the next meeting, I will be giving an update on where we are, what my analysis of these 70 recommended changes are. That'll be at the June meeting. So we can talk about, here's what we can do internally now. Here's what we're going to need CLERBs to help the board, to work with the Board of Supervisors on. And if anybody outside of CLERB wants to, agrees, then they do whatever they can do to help us make those changes.
Okay, thank you. I'll hold off my next question for Ruthie. You have your hand up.
Thank you. As you speak, I think of more and more questions. So I've got 3. I don't know if you want them all at the same time. But first, I mean, the work you're doing is incredible. I really can't think of any kind of work that would be more frustrating than to never know the outcome of your investigations and recommendations. So hats off for sure. But okay, so let's see. First of all, is the CLERB board fully staffed?
No.
You're looking
No, it's not. And this is a major frustration for me. So we have 11 members. All right. We are 11 members, 2 from each of the 5 supervisorial districts, and then 1 floater, obviously, to make 11. I've been back since November of 2020. We've had a District 1 South Bay opening since I've been here. We have a District 3 opening right now, still, that we've had for some time. District 2, our current chairperson, we have 9 people on the board right now, but she shouldn't even be here because her term expired last June. They served upwards of 2 3-year terms from July to June. So she was not reappointed. She was appointed by Diane Jacobs, right? But now it's Supervisor Anderson, and he wanted to appoint his own folks. But she's been basically 9 months of just filling in because we still don't have a replacement for District 2. So technically we have 3 technical openings. I'm not seeing any movement. It's frustrating because we want a full board, and we want a board that's going to represent the county demographically, economic, you name it, right? And right now our quorum, so we have to have 5 people. We have 9 on the board right now. We have to have 5, but with So anything to carry would need 5 votes. If you have the board, we have 6. You know, if you have a full board, you need 6, but it's frustrating. And so the process is all of this right now. And just so you know, I'm not a political appointee. I work for the CLERB board. I think I'm the only county employee who can't be terminated by the county. I work for the CLERB board. Those board members are appointed by the board of supervisors. So I'm saying to you, I'm frustrated because this is what more important time in law enforcement community relations are we at than right now, especially with what's going on. Fill this board, get this board to represent the community. Let's have our 11 members and let's do the work that we need to do. We don't have that yet.
So people apply when they're appointed by the supervisor that represents them?
Yes, ultimately that's what happens. So people apply, they apply through the clerk of the board. It used to be the executive officer would play a role. That didn't work out because the executive officer was pretty much hiring his or her friends. And then the executive officer is not held accountable. So right now everything is outside of me. They're my boss anyway. So I don't have any role. They apply through the clerk of the board. Those applications are then forwarded to the respective district in which the person lives or works. The supervisor staff, they narrow it down to 2 or 3 candidates. They send that to the Finance and General Government Group leader, who then they interview and then forward it to Helen Robbins Meyer, who then makes the recommended appointment to the Board of Supervisors, who then makes the appointment. But right now, we're not even, the Board of Supervisors isn't even being given names to look at because they're still in the background or they're still in the screening process or interview process. It's just, I don't really know the hang up.
Okay, thanks. Can I ask that one, Jeannie?
Okay. I'm dying to do mine, but go ahead.
Well, I'm just thinking that, regarding the complaints, the signed complaints that they have to give to somebody in the sheriff's department. I mean, to me, that's like the fox guarding the hen house. It seems to me that any complaint should actually go to an outside agency like CLERB or some kind of an independent agency. I know that's the way it works in psychiatric hospitals and group homes, and you can't build trust and transparency if the people you're complaining about are the ones that are doing the investigations.
Well, so the complaints that are filed, okay, for example, if someone's in jail and they file a complaint with us and they put it in writing, because they have to, right? And if they mail it out, then obviously that's going to be looked at by the deputies who are, they know where the complaint's going, they know who's sending it to clerk. So what I want is, now that we're almost at full staffing here, we have 6 investigators now. We used to, for years, only had 2. Now we're getting 6. I just lost one. He wasn't a fit. But I want, when we get fully staffed, for our investigators to go out in person. If somebody, because they'll call us collect. And so if we can go out to the jails, yes, the deputies are going to know that CLERB is there to see you for a professional visit, but they're not going to be able to look at what you're saying or writing. They're not going to know who you're complaining about, right? So I would like to see us to be more proactive that way, to go out and get that right from them without having it be screened. But to your point, interestingly enough, every complaint, every complaint that we receive that's signed under penalty of perjury, we must turn it over to the sheriff's department, no matter what. We have to tell them that we're investigating their people. Now, any internal affairs investigation they get, any complaint that they get, even if it's about the same incident involving the same people and the same deputies, they don't have to turn over anything to us, nothing. So but here's the thing, so for us to do our investigation, we have to request information from the department. We are beholden to the department. So if somebody alleges that the deputy so-and-so used excessive force against them outside of the jail cell, and when they were coming out to eat or whatever the case is, we have to notify the department that that's the complaint. Here's the person complaining. Here's their signed complaint. Here's exactly what they're saying. And we must request information to include jail surveillance video, any reports that were written, any logs or anything. So there, I mean, it's that, we're relying upon the department to give us the information. Now, do we think that the department is not turning over information to us? I don't think that's the case. I think they've been very forthcoming when we're asking for information. I do. I believe that. And I believe that for the most part, our relationship with them is professional and it's collegial. And, I mean, they understand we have a job to do. The people that we interact with, I do believe we're getting the information. But to your point, everybody knows. Everybody in the sheriff's department knows. We have major issues right now that people are afraid to put in writing. Look, all you got to do is look at the news and the medical examiner or whatever. The deaths that are occurring in custody are primarily overdose deaths, right? They're primarily fentanyl, sometimes meth. Well, the drugs are getting in there somehow. How? Inmates know how they're getting in, but inmates don't want to tell you how it's getting in for fear of retribution. There are people who allege that deputies or professional staff are bringing it in, that laundry workers are bringing it in, that trustees or, but nobody wants to go on record because they believe that they'll be retaliated against. So that really hamstrings us, right? There has to be that way. And I don't know how to do it without us having to, because we have to get the information from the department. So if we had somehow a stronger model that we could conduct our investigations and get our information ourselves, have access to the databases that they have access to the information where we could get it ourselves as opposed to asking for it. I don't know how else to do it, but I believe that's what the Office of Inspector General has in Los Angeles.
Wonderful. Thank you. I think we've taken up so much of your time. I'm hoping this is a short question.
I talk a lot, so just you shut me out.
No, it's fascinating. When we had the Sheriff's Forum, a lot of the problems that we were asked about, they attributed to the problems being that they were understaffed and they couldn't seem to get enough staffing. Is that true? Do you know if it's true for all counties, or are our salaries much lower than other counties, or why do you think we're so understaffed?
I don't have inside knowledge of that. I only know what the candidates themselves say when asked those questions, and the candidates will tell you that the morale is low. I actually do know that the morale is low, but the morale is going to be low in a lot of law enforcement agencies lately. With the increased scrutiny, the demand for the public to change a culture that has not really been working, right? And then demand for different things about how to handle mental health issues and homelessness and transparency. So I think that morale is going to be low in a lot of agencies for those reasons. It's just a change of time. Do I think that they're short-staffed? I think that they're short-staffed to do what they need to do. I mean, to do it correctly. Like, most of the recommendations, when we make the recommendations, for example, we made a recommendation that they have body scanners, but they only scan people that are coming in the first time. We made a recommendation to them that anytime someone leaves a facility, goes to court, goes to another place, that when they come back, they're scanned again because they to get the drugs out there. Their response was, we don't have the manpower to do it. We don't have the staffing to do it. It's probably true. And they don't have the body scanners either, but it's probably true that they don't have the staffing. We made a recommendation last night to increase the number of fentanyl detection dogs. They have one. And to update your policy to say that you're going to sniff employees, visitors, and inmates. Because the drugs are getting in somehow. But the response is going to be, we don't have the funding, we don't have the manpower. It's always going to be that. Their mental health and medical health response is they're trying to get more staff. So to do it right, no. I'm sure they're understaffed. Absolutely. And I'm sure that they would need additional staffing to do what's best, to do everything they can to prevent the deaths. Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you. Margie, you had a question, and then we need to
Maybe, I mean,
Oh.
we've had these sheriff interviews. What are some things we should look for in the new sheriff that you would like to see?
I
Or do you
would
have any
love-
recommendations, although
I would love, look, if I was running for sheriff, I would think that you would want someone that's going to take this death in custody situation and make it the impetus to make San Diego County the gold standard. Listen to what the recommendations are from the auditors. Listen to what our independent analysis has revealed. Listen to the community and make this something. If I was a sheriff, I would be front and center for every death. I would be the point of contact. I would be out there. I would be going to the scenes, every death scene. I would be meeting with families. I would be having a press conference myself. The number one thing is that, in my opinion, transparency as much as possible. Stop hiding behind methodology wasn't correct. Stop doing that. Just listen, be as transparent as possible. Communicate with the public as much as you possibly can. That is the only way you're going to get public trust, as opposed to not coming out, just, you have a PIO, you have a public information officer. I shouldn't be the spokesperson for the sheriff's department. I speak very highly of some of the things that they do, but it shouldn't be me doing that. They should be out in front addressing this concern out in front. And I'm sorry, they're not doing it. They're not doing it, in my opinion. So that's what I would do. As far as the sheriff goes, look, that's first. The deaths in custody are first. The racial disparities of policing that have been indicated by the ACLU's Campaign Zero report, and also the department's own commissioned report from the Center for Policing Equity out of Yale, has indicated that there are racially disparate practices. There's somehow, some way. Now, why is that the case? You need to address that as well, because for obvious reasons. So those would be my two biggest things that I would be addressing. As far as the morale in the department, that's a major issue, and I don't know where that comes from. There needs to be some kind of culture change, and I don't know how you do that. We'll see who the next sheriff is, but they're going to have their work cut out for them. But right now, deaths in custody, I'd be front and center of that every day, all day, and implementing every possible thing and taking every recommendation that's made and going out to every community and showing up at every death scene that happens in the jail. If you're going to show up for a deputy-involved shooting, if a deputy, heaven forbid, gets into a shooting tonight, I guarantee you the sheriff will be there. Is the sheriff there if someone dies in custody tonight? What's the difference? There's no difference. So that's how I would look at things.
I'm interested in who you'd vote for, but the league has no.
What's that?
I'm interested who you would favor, because I'm having a hard time making a decision. I
Well,
know
we're being-
Cyril I don't want.
Yeah, we're being recorded, so I can't tell you. So, yeah.
And the league never takes a stand on anything.
No.
Neither does Paul Parker with CLERB.
Yeah. Right. Well, thank you so much, Paul. This has been terrific. We've learned so much, and
I hope so.
perhaps somewhere down the road we could have you again, maybe after some changes have been made. Or
I'm available at any time. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and address you, but more importantly, I appreciate the fact that you care about what's going on and that you're willing to reach out. So I'm available to you at all times. I wish you nothing but the best. Thank you for what you folks do for us as well. Thank you.
thank you so much, Paul.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Well, our hour has, I hated to cut it short because everything he said was important. And